Welcome back. We are continuing our discussion about civil rights in the context of elections. We have just been joined by another friend, and that's Ms. Judith Karpova, who is a long-time activist on the issues of war, opposing the war, and supporting civil liberties and human rights. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we are also going to show you some of her paintings that she has made about war in Iraq.
Well, they're actually made by a woman that I met in Iraq, an
okay.
Iraqi woman painter, Maher.
Okay, we'll be showing that a little later. Let me ask you, how do you see this issue? And I think you have the twin focus of war and the loss of liberties and human rights. How do you see that playing out right now?
Well, I'm personally affected by it. I went to Iraq as a human shield before the war, as a protest against the war. I've been watching this happen, first militarily and then economically, and they seem to have developed this tag team between these two policies, ever since the days of the Vietnam War, at which time I was a very radical activist. And when the war was over and we all went back to our personal lives, lo and behold, we've got free trade policies, and now the Treasury Department and tiny elite in Europe and the U.S. has taken over the economies of 3 continents. And then you have those policies being applied to the Balkans, to Yugoslavia. And when the opportunity arose with the destruction of the World Trade Center, there was an excuse to apply those policies to Iraq. And they converged there. The economic stripping of Iraq of all of its autonomy, and the invasion and occupation. So the economic invasion was enforced by a military invasion. And I'm an older person, actually. I'm in my 60s now, and I thought to myself, when does this ever stop? And who's going to do it if I don't? And where have I been while this has been creeping up and getting a grip on our global economy and political system? So I was really in despair, and all I could think of to do was just to go there and meet these people face to face. And because Western lives count in this country and in this political system, and people of color, people who have strange names, people who can be manipulated to be seen as enemies don't count. So I had a little leverage by actually going there. And I went. I left shortly before the war. I met many Iraqi people. I don't know if any of them are still alive. I know that 2 of them are still alive. That's all I know. And I came back, and there was a letter waiting for me from the Treasury Department saying that I had broken the economic sanctions against Iraq by going there and buying food to eat and allegedly performing a service. I was a human shield, and what we were trying to do was defend the civilian infrastructure so that it wouldn't be bombed again, which in that destruction, especially the destruction of water treatment plants, and the children having no clean water to drink, and the Iraqis being unable to import repair parts, directly led to the death of almost 1 million children. Okay. So I come back, and I'm being told, you bought a cup of tea, and therefore we're going to fine you thousands of dollars. So I've been fighting this in the courts since 2003.
Before you go to court, let me just bring it in.
Sure.
Ms. Karpova makes a very important point there. That's the human price of wars and conflicts in terms of 1 million kids killed. And I think it was Madeleine Albright was asked by Ted Koppel, was it worth it? And she said, yes, it was. That meaning the price of 500,000 to 1 million kids killed.
Because they were all her kids, right?
Yeah. And so I think the question then becomes is, talk to us about the human price of this thing. And for clients are concerned, people that you see, you meet, their families, and how is it impacting the communities and individual families of the accused?
I don't think a person who hasn't been in this situation can really understand the devastation that these charges bring. Because it's not just the person who is charged and locked up in solitary confinement. There's a whole web of lives that are connected to people. It's the immediate family, it's the extended family, it's the community, it's the city, and it's also global in this day and age. So what happens is you have the immediate impact of a person whose life is being destroyed. You have the economic impact that bail is either astronomically high or not given at all. Attorney's fees are very expensive if they go the route of paying for their attorneys to fight the case. And to mount the defense, there are other costs involved. So what happens is you see these cases all around the country using up resources, using up emotional capital, and it is a tactic that we've seen throughout this country's history of keeping movements and keeping targeted populations from having a forward-moving agenda. It keeps communities on their heels because you're defensive and not actually moving the agenda forward. So it's devastating on all these counts.
Yeah. And have I understand correctly, you had personal experience of being sort of targeted. So not only other lives that you saw being touched by war, but your own life has been touched. Is that correct?
Yes, it has. I mean, the Treasury Department, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, has the power to bring charges and decide on guilt. And under the law, the Iraq sanctions law of the United States, they are not required to present any evidence. There's no hearing. There's no presence, adjudicative presence of any impartial body to assess their charges and require that they substantiate them. They can just say, well, this is what we think you did, and you're guilty, and pay up, and if you don't, well, we can take your house, we can ruin your job. I'm on Social Security. They could take that. So, and yes, I mean, I think that my case is much less threatening to me personally than the case of your client. But this is how they start. They start with people that are Arab American, that even though they're citizens, they use vulnerable target populations. And they bring the most serious, it's almost as if they're testing, they're doing some kind of social engineering tests to see how far can we go before people will resist. In my case, they're charging me money. You know, they're not locking me up thus far because I am not in as vulnerable a position. But once, I think, in my opinion, once that precedent is started, they can use these really state terror tactics on a wider and wider array of U.S. citizens. It just depends on what our tolerance level is.
And I really think what the country is moving towards is the idea that certain types of thoughts are criminal. And we see that with the House bill you've been talking about, the idea that there are homegrown domestic radicals. And it's the idea that if you see someone get prosecuted, you're not going to have any thoughts about challenging U.S. policy. That if the government has the authority to declare someone a radical, that they can put them in jail or have them be subpoenaed to some type of government body. If you look in England right now, in London, they have cameras all over their streets, everywhere. They have control orders where someone can be told, you get a knock on the door by the police and told, you're under a control order. You don't have any legal process. You don't have an attorney who can challenge it. You're just told you're under a control order. So you have to report to the police. You can't leave certain jurisdiction. All these types of constrictions placed on your freedom of movement with no process at all. Why? Because the government decided that you were a radical. That's where this is all going towards, the criminalization of ideas. And once a society moves to that point where people are afraid to even have an idea, what is that? Is that something that we really want to live in?
But that, I think, again, mystifies me. Why is it that the campuses where ideas are supposed to be, that's the marketplace of ideas, professors, intellectuals, writers, the media, the thinkers, has such small concern about it that they're expressing publicly, and therefore it seems like it's a clean sweep for the other side. You know, they're having a field day, nobody's there to stop them or to talk about them.